For me, I liken waking up like many raindrops that fall into a bucket, and then one raindrop at the end finally pushes the bucket over its capacity and it overflows. And it definitely was, ever since I was a kid, many, many little things that make you go, and yet it still didn't click because you held on to that, but it is the truth. For me, the organization was a little bit separate from Jehovah and from the Bible, and I felt like what imperfect men do is not the same as what it's supposed to be, but it is because it's imperfect. And yet, over the years, I just saw so many things happen that were wrong and that were the organization's fault and that weren't handled right. And this was ever since I was a kid. And I think partially too because my dad and my grandpa were elders, and a lot of things happened with them that was wrong, and a lot of wrongdoing I saw as to how they were treated and how the organization was just cruel, and how honestly most people in positions of power in the organization are exactly the opposite as what we're supposed to be as Christians, like the exact opposite of how I perceive Jesus to be. So you were lucky if you had one kind elder in your congregation. Well, isn't that weird? Isn't that weird that there's just one guy who really is really nice and the other ones are so awful? Like, a lot of them were cruel and jerks and just couldn't wait to counsel you or correct you in negative. Like, it's funny because they always have this, oh, don't be negative if you call out the organization. Meanwhile, the whole organization is negative. The entire deal with women wearing skirts, they're too tight, they're too short. You're constantly being criticized. And like just now, they finally changed the rule that you're allowed to wear pants. And just think about that. You're a grown woman and now you're allowed to wear pants by some dudes that made the rule that now you can wear pants. That doesn't even seem like it came from God. That seems man-made. That seems like going beyond the things that are written. And couldn't we have spared so much heartache if we would have been able to wear pants all along? I mean, I wouldn't have gotten counseled on your skirt's too short. And I always thought like, okay, what is too short? It's not like we have something in the Bible that says, your skirt shall not be 2 inches above your knee. You know, I mean, where's that rule? So all those little things contributed to me really my bucket filling, and the child abuse cases and stuff that was going on that I didn't know about, the Australian Royal Commission, that was what made my bucket finally overflow. And I have to say, like, even as a little kid, when I overheard my family talk about stupid stuff that happened in the organization, they would always add, but that's not right. That's not right. Because from their Bible-trained conscience, the situation wasn't being handled right. But the sentence, that's not right, but that is not right. It just stuck in my mind. Here's an example. My aunt and uncle, they started having a watchtower study at their house they were newlyweds, and they had a bunch of people come over that were also newlyweds, and they were going to have like this spiritual activity together by studying the watchtower together. And wouldn't you know it, the elders immediately shut that down. And they said that they had instructions from Bethel that they don't want groups meeting independently to study the Bible. And that's kind of weird, isn't it? Because shouldn't it just matter that we're studying God's word? And here Bethel is shutting something down. Also, something that is going beyond the things that are written. You're supposed to read God's word, the Bible, daily. And here these young couples were doing that and they got shut down. One of those things that make you think, that's kind of strange. So there were just so many examples like this. My grandpa, he had one story where he was the coordinator for the drama, and in between sets, they had to, so they were playing this cassette tape that had the drama on it, and you had to go on stage at the convention and act out the drama. Well, the break on the tape wasn't long enough for them to switch sets. And so my grandpa pressed the stop button on the cassette player so that they would have enough time to switch sets out and change and do that thing. And one of the, I think it was like the circuit overseer or someone who was overseeing the convention, went up to grandpa and said, "We are not supposed to stop the tape. Those are instructions from, Bethel." And my grandpa's like, "Well, it doesn't even really make any sense because we don't have enough time in between. So if we don't stop the tape, then the drama will continue playing, but we're not ready. There's not enough time." And the other brother was adamant. "We're not stopping the tape." And grandpa was like, "God, this is so stupid. Like your usual common sense would say, who cares? Stop the tape, And so he would tell, my family was totally okay calling these things out. And they would say if something wasn't right. They didn't like the broadcast. They felt like that was so wrong. Also, there was, I think it was Brother Let who had a broadcast and basically begged for money. And that was a big no for the old-timer J-dubs, because in Russell's time, we didn't ask for donations. We were proud to not be like the churches. We were so proud never to beg for money because, the work was steered by God, so we don't need to ask for money. And so this broadcast where they're begging for money was like disgusting to them. And I think that my grandpa and my mom started viewing the new governing body that wanted to be on TV and display how, have this prominence and everything. They viewed them as apostates because of the scripture. In later periods of time, be careful, there will be men among you who will rise up and speak twisted things. To them, they viewed the new governing body like that. Oh my goodness, we're in the time of the end. The apostasy among us has started because all of this was wrong. My grandpa was almost 90, and he said, "I feel like they're talking to me like I'm an elementary school kid getting scolded." And it is so insulting when you're an intelligent man and you get talked to like this and basically counseled with every broadcast. And really, it's never good enough. Whatever you do is not good enough. One sister, when we were in Europe, we had the circuit overseer, and the circuit overseer was, it's not enough. We need to do more hours. We need to go preaching. And this girl was furious after the meeting. She had a mini meltdown at the Kingdom Hall. She's like, "It's never enough. We all work our asses off." And yes, she should probably said that because she was feisty. And she's like, "It's just never good enough. Whatever we do, we can work and we can go in service. And it's always, you have to do more." And I definitely felt like that too, because you could never study all the stuff that they wanted you to study. I don't know how people did it who had kids and worked and were elders or pioneers. There's no way that you can keep up with all the material they want you to read and study. So you're in this perpetual state of feeling guilty. You're always feeling guilty about everything. And I think I still have to work on that, where I, A, feel guilty, and B, I second guess myself with everything I do because I thought, oh my gosh, is this okay? Oh my gosh, am I going to get in trouble? Because you're constantly getting in trouble. You're constantly being told how unworthy you are and how you can't do all the stuff that you're supposed to do. And it's depressing. It really is. And I think that was part of the reason why it took me so long to finally tell my story, because I have to work on my own constant feeling guilty and overcome that and realize that other people are telling their stories. This is my story. And if I can help someone else who's going through something similar, then I really want to do that. And that is why it took me years, but here I am, and I'm happy that I'm telling it, because I do think it is important when other people tell their stories. So, but therapy really did help, and I think that my therapist, who was amazing and kind, never ever came out to me and said, hey, you're in a cult, you should leave. Your religion is keeping you trapped. That wouldn't have worked. I would have quit going. She recognized it for what it was and helped me get the right materials to me and signs and recognitions where I eventually realized I was in a cult or high control religion without her ever saying it. And the Trauma Bonding book by Patrick Carnes, it contributed to that because it had that whole chapter on religious abuse and trauma bonding. And it did make me think like, wow, this is crazy. And then, being in the women's group where we all told our stories, that really helped me too. And I always felt like I had this extra layer that kept me trapped, which was the religion and the guilt when you separate and leave. But kudos to her. And I'm so thankful because I feel like she really nudged me in the right direction gently. Because waking someone up from a cult is no easy task. It really is like shaking someone in a deep sleep that doesn't want to wake up. And so she very gently helped to wake me up. And it was essential. But once the floodgates opened and I went on Google, it just was like, yes, a rabbit hole. I read everything. I looked at everything. I ordered every book, but I had to still kind of do it. I felt like it's so hard to explain this to somebody, but you are terrified for someone even seeing you read apostate material. You're terrified. So I was doing it on my phone at night, no one knowing. And you now have this problem at hand. How am I going to get out of this? I think that my mom was already PMO, person in, mind out, without really realizing that she was, because she constantly was upset at everything in the organization that they were doing. She felt like it just was not how they were taught. This was all wrong. So she had like deep cracks in her foundation of like the Jehovah's Witness faith. One thing that she was really, really mad about was they got these new songbooks. And boy, was that a sore point for her, because they took out all the songs that we always sang and that were like beautiful. And then some other songs that they left, they completely changed the melody and they changed the lyrics. And then they said, it's because the old songs were so hard to sing, so we simplified them now. Well, funny how, they're telling you it's easier now and no one could sing it right. Everybody was confused, same song, different melody. So they started having practice sessions to be able to sing the new songs. But you told us that the new songs are easier to sing. So now we're having practice sessions to be able to sing them. I mean, that is some cult brainwashing right there. The cult says it's easier to sing. Everybody's like, yes, yes, and it's not. And so one of the sisters was like in this culty haze of, isn't it wonderful? Isn't the new songbook wonderful? Oh, everything's so great. And my mom said, I really don't like it. And the death stare that my mom got, like, you are immediately labeled. Immediately. Like, how dare you speak your mind? How dare you even say it's not wonderful when it's from Jehovah? Like, it has to be wonderful. Whoa, cult red flags. And I saw the sisters look like, it was just like offended. And they kind of labeled my mom as like negative or critical thinker because of all of that. And it just, was still, I think she took a different path than me. She saw all the Bible things that were wrong. And for me now, I found all this stuff out. Well, my mom, she did think that whole situation with the brother was awful too, and that it wasn't being handled. But now I started like Googling things. Another thing, this is so helpful if you're trying to wake somebody up gently. Watch stuff about other cults, because you don't feel like it's apostate material when you're in it, and you don't feel like they're attacking you, which if you say anything about your faith when you're in a cult, immediately shut down. They block everything out. But if it's like, if I'm a Jehovah's Witness and I see something about Mormons, that doesn't affect me. I can talk about them, so that's such a helpful thing, is to watch documentaries about other cults. And yet you realize the structure of the cults are all the same, even if they don't believe the same thing. So I actually watched the Scientology and the Aftermath Leah Remini show while I was still a Jehovah's Witness, totally in. And one of the things that really stuck out to me was the shunning part. It was heart-wrenching to see how it affects families. And it was one thing that I didn't understand with shunning, is how we throw that label at someone and they're stuck with that label forever. And I really talked, we're kind of lucky. So my cousin got disfellowshipped when he was still, like, I want to say teenager, early 20s. But the problem is this: he was baptized at 14. That is way too young to sign a lifelong contract, to make a commitment. As a kid, you're not capable to do that. You cannot make a life decision at 14. It should not count. It should be invalid. Later on, he figured out before all of us did that it's a cult. And he figured out he really doesn't want to be a part of the cult. And he tried to come back at first just to be reinstated. But like I said in a previous episode, it depends on what elder body you have. If they're nice, if they're not nice. Well, these elders were jerks and had it in for him. And they would not reinstate him. Meanwhile, they reinstated his buddy, who was still, quote unquote, participating in wrongdoing. And yet he was reinstated, but my cousin wasn't. That's messed up. And so he ended up getting married, had a child, was a family father, good man, but still disfellowshipped. And I would say, I think it's kind of messed up how we still attach that label to someone just because they don't want to be a Jehovah's Witness, but he's a good man. So he's not doing anything, quote unquote, wrong in like the perception of Jehovah's Witnesses. And yet, like, how does his family feel that we can't talk to him? That's so messed up. And I would kind of go round and round with that, because I'm like, that just doesn't even make any sense. He was a kid when he made that decision. It shouldn't follow him his whole life. And I did feel like that was wrong. But, I somewhat like adhered to it. Because, at the end of the day, we're like, this is the faith that I'm committed to. And I guess like that's what God wants me to do. And when you grow up with shunning being part of your culture, you don't think about the psychological effects it has on that person and how, awful it is for them. And watching the Leah Remini documentary really brought that home to me, because I thought, oh my gosh, like, it is horrible what people go through with shunning, and yet we do the same thing, and our families are broken as well. Like, it's horrible. And I thought, boy, like, the whole way Scientology operates, we do that too. And I remember thinking, but yet we have the truth. Because I still believed like the Bible truth is what we have, and yet we do like a culty structure. And so I maybe really didn't agree to that. And I have to say too that my family wasn't like super hardcore with shunning. My grandparents, at the end of the day, they ended up being human and they had a heart. they always loved my cousin. They didn't feel like it was right how he was treated, and they would talk to him. And honestly, like, kudos to them for having a heart and for being human at the end of the day, really. Because I always thought, like, when I had kids, I don't know if I could shun them. I don't know if I could do that. Like, that's your child. It seems so messed up. And I have an aunt in Europe who has a bunch of children, and she's kind of like a free thinker too, because one day she told me that she was at the convention and she was just so upset because one of the sisters in her congregation had a part on stage and her kid is disfellowshipped. And she said on stage, "It's so sad because my kid is dead to me." And the audience applauded. And my aunt, who is an elder's wife, thought this was so messed up. She was so upset about this. She's like, how could you speak like that about your own kid? How could you say that? That is your child. He's not dead, you know? And that's another thing that made me go, because didn't she show to be more like Jesus by having compassion than the lady who's on stage that's supposed to be the role model, who says like her kid is like dead to her? So it was so weird. So anyways, back to the Scientology documentary. One of the things they did in Scientology is David Miskov, you know, the leader of Scientology, his dad was waking up and he went on Google and he Googled Scientology. And I remember that part because he's like, how come I never did that before? How come I never Googled Scientology? And then he saw like everything on there. And I felt similar. And also how they label everything as apostate lies. Everything is fake news. Everything is lies. And one awake that we had shortly before I woke up, they wrote in it like fake news. They used that term. And I thought, why would they use that term? Like, you can't, that seems so weird for them to jump on that bandwagon of fake news. And meanwhile, of course, the organization would love that because that helps them to discredit all the pedophilia stuff that's out there in the news. That's all fake news to them. And they can say it's all from Satan. And it keeps people off the internet and keeps them from accepting what's going on with Jehovah's Witnesses in the media. And so I started slowly telling my mom things. And my mom said, well, but we don't know if that's true because, you know, like a lot of stuff is from Satan out there, which we're completely brainwashed to believe. And I thought, okay, I'm going to watch the Scientology documentary with her now. And we got to the episode where they say the same thing. Oh, it's all fake news. It's all like bad, like it's negative talk and stuff. And it really did make her like, oh, wow, they do the same thing. And then I said to her, Mom, look at the characteristics of a cult. I pulled up Professor Steve Hassan's bite model and Jehovah's Witnesses and how it portrays the signs of a cult and what a healthy religion or organization is versus high control / cult. And we fell on the cult side 100%, you know. And she's like, that is weird. During that time, I also started reading Ray Francis' book. And I started watching JT and Lady C, the critical thinkers. As a Jehovah's Witness, you're so afraid of apostates. So John Cedars was a no-go for me at the time. He calls himself the apostate. Didn't really want anything to do with that. That was like danger to me. But JT seemed like this super nice elder who, you know, just talks to you and explains things calmly and reasons from the Bible. I love that. That really was effective. And he had one episode where he talked about how you need to read Crisis of Conscience by Ray France. And at the time, it is very, very hard for Jehovah's Witnesses to separate the Bible and the organization because they have done such a good job linking those two together. And if you want to leave the organization, you have that question, but where do we go? Where do we go? And every other religion is badmouthed so bad your whole life, so you don't feel comfortable there. Like, I can't imagine really going to church and, for example, there's a cross there and stuff. Like, it's just so ingrained in me that that's quote unquote wrong, because the Jehovah's Witnesses did a very good job by making everything bad, pagan, and like they're the only truth that you hear that since birth. And JT helped me like really get on a path where I'm okay to start separating the organization from like being a Christian. And I was very determined, like I still want to worship Jehovah, I still want to do what's right, I want to read the Bible and all that. And so for me, in the beginning, Ray Francis' book, who was a governing body member, who saw everything from the top, who saw all the things that went wrong, how they were human, how they went beyond things that were written, and how he explains things was so really lovely. He had every right to have hate in his heart. He was absolutely abused. And yet he decided to write his book, not in anger, but like really with kindness and just explaining things and bringing proof to everything. And because I had seen so much, I knew these things were true. And he put proof behind it because, well, you also believe like, well, this isn't true. This is apostate lies. But how he presented everything, I knew it was true. And so the book, as I'm reading it, and it's helping me wake up, and it's helping me see like this organization was really like always wrong. They were always wrong. There was not a point in time where they were right. I started sitting down with my mom, and she's like, but it's the truth, and how Russell, he figured this and this out. And I'm like, no, it was wrong even then. Like, it was always wrong, Mom. It wasn't right under Russell. Russell believed in this planet that Jehovah's on. Russell believed in pyramidology, or however you pronounce that, which that's a crazy thing. If you didn't know this completely floored me. I actually thought this was really truly like fake news because it's so absurd. And meanwhile, it is true. Russell, he calculated 1914 with the measurements of the pyramids. You can't even make this stuff up. And in his early literature, he talks about the pyramids and calculating dates. However, the old literature is not on jw.org in the library, so you can't look it up there. But go to the online library of Jehovah's Witnesses, type in pyramids, and they actually acknowledge this in their literature nowadays, that Russell really did have something with pyramids. And his grave was near Pittsburgh, is near Pittsburgh, and they had a pyramid by his grave, and it had like Watchtower Society on there. And another weird thing is it's a Mason lot. Like the lot that he's buried in is a Freemason lot. Weird. And then the big pyramid right there by his grave that says Watchtower Society on there. Weird. And that was one of the things I could not wait to go visit and see it with my own eyes. I wanted to take pictures by this pyramid and send it to like all my J-Dub friends. Look, I'm at the pyramid that Russell erected here, blah, blah. And wouldn't you know it, I was actually planning a trip to go there. And I can't believe this happened. 1 week before I went, someone, and we don't even know who, but it got hauled off. Like, the pyramid is no more. Many people have seen it with their own eyes. I don't know who removed it. I bet you it was Watchtower. But I didn't get to see the crazy pyramid. But yeah, it's not truth if it's all wrong. It's not truth when they're constantly changing it. If they're constantly changing stuff, how is that the truth? Was God wrong? And if you go on jw.org and you type in beliefs clarified, the list of things that they changed is insane. There's no way this is from God, ever, when it constantly is wrong and gets changed. Plus, how can it be the truth if it was wrong at some point? It just didn't even make any sense. And my mom, she agreed. She was like, oh boy. And then I thought, okay, somehow I'm going to have to get her to read Crisis of Conscience by Ray France. I'm just going to put it on her phone. Didn't know what was going to happen. It's a little fear in you, like mom freaking out. Oh no, my daughter's apostate. It's total chance of that happening. And I put it on her phone, and the lady read the book. She read the book, and then we were both like, whoa. And I think during this process, and it was right before she started reading the book, I remember the last meeting I went to. I think the second to last meeting was the Watchtower on pedophiles. And it said that, if somebody's accused or whatnot, he may never have a position in the congregation. So a lot of people read that as he can never have a position, but how they word it is really he may never, which leaves it open to the organization that he may not, but he also may, and I was just, that whole Watchtower, I was so mad. And then they're talking about, like, this one elder, he gave a comment, and he's like, yeah, and we always want to forgive people, and, we don't know what happened. Maybe he missed some meetings, and he hadn't been doing his personal Bible study. And I'm thinking, oh, yeah, you become a pedophile by missing some meetings and not studying the Bible. And then I'm thinking, they're acting like it's like adultery or fornication where two grown adults make a decision to have sex. But the process of grooming somebody is a willful, deliberate crime. A crime. And then I'm just sitting there like, I can't even believe like what they're commenting. I was so angry. I'm like, this is some baloney. And it's not like, oh, I missed a meeting. Like, no. And you can't just, oh yeah, we forgive you as a congregation, because pedophiles, they keep doing it. Once they do it, they're like a person that should not be among kids because they keep doing it. And so at the end of the Watchtower study, the elder said, so what did we learn today? And one brother in a comment said, we learned that we have to call the police when something like this happened. And the elder the Watchtower study conductor, added to that comment at the end, only if you're in a state where it's a legal requirement to report. And I'm just like floored and pissed. And I'm like, this place is not safe. It's not safe to come here with kids. I know so many congregations who have a pedophile in their midst and families don't know. So here I was, a single mom with 3 kids. And, if you have a son and he's at that age where he really doesn't want to go to the women's bathroom with you anymore, at that point, they're on their own. You don't know what happens in that bathroom because, as William Bowen says, the former elder who was, Silence of the Lambs, where he's like fighting for these abuse victims, he said it's a pedophile paradise, and that's scary. And I just did not feel safe. So that was the second to last meeting. The next meeting, and it's like a thing where you kind of have to weasel yourself out, especially if you're kind of friends with everyone and everyone knows you and you're active in the congregation. You can't just stop going. Plus, I'm now living like in J-Dub heaven, where J-Dub heaven is Exjw hell, because I was surrounded by witnesses in the house that we had moved to, which at the time I thought was like great. I felt like super safe. Oh, I have witnesses left and right of me. And then now how am I going to get out of this? And I started getting dressed for the last meeting we were going to go to. Got the kids dressed. And then I sit down and I'm like, I can't go back to that place. I cannot go back. And, we're in the process of waking up. So for my mom, it was kind of like, oh no. Like my kid is now stopping going to meetings, which when that's like the most important thing, go to meeting, never miss a meeting. And so she's like, oh no. But on the other hand, she thinks, I totally get it. And that was the last meeting I went to. But then ensues a storm of people trying to get you back. And I'll talk about that tomorrow.